This is the second screencast in a multi-part series on creating the Simply Settings Rails plugin. Today we're going to briefly cover creating migrations during gem installation and then dive into test driving the Simply Settings gem. When a gem is loaded by Rails, it looks into your lib directory and checks if there's a generators directory in there. We're going to take advantage of this by creating an install generator. The install generator will be responsible for installing our migration into the dummy Rails application, or any Rails application that mounts this gem. So you can see here that we're looking up a migration template file. In this case it's called create-simply-settings.rb, and what it is a Rails migration that creates our Simply Settings table. So I'll show you how this works. If we go into our dummy Rails application, we can install our migration with Rails G Simply Settings install. And we can run the migrations to actually add the table with rakedb migrate. And we also want to update our test database, which we can do with rakedb test prepare. Okay. So let's go back to Sublime Text and we'll actually start test driving the Simply Settings gem. So I'm going to get rid of the directory tree on the left and split into two panes. Load our gem code on the left and our test on the right. So I've gone through and added a bunch of pending tests that describe how I expect this gem to behave. The gist of it is that we expect to be able to set and get different settings that are dynamically defined. We expect to be able to delete settings. We expect to be able to fetch settings, list settings, and set and retrieve objects. So when you, if you set a hash or an array or a boolean, we expect to get a hash or array or boolean back from the getter. So today we're just going to go through and define these first two context blocks for basically getting, setting, and deleting. Alright, so let's get started. I'm going to switch this from a pending test to an it block, and so it defines getter and setter for any setter. So in this test setup we will define a setting called hello, set it equal to world, and what we expect to happen is that when we call the method hello, we expect to get back world. So all the settings are dynamic. So in order to make this work, we need to override method missing inside of our settings class. Now eventually in a follow-on screencast on caching, we'll go through and actually dynamically define all of the keys as they go into method missing, and that way we'll respond. Respond to will continue to work, and we'll also add caching with Rails.cache as well. So let's override method missing. Method missing accepts a method name, a number of arguments, and a block. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So let's start by just getting setting setting a key to work, what we want to do is check if the method name ends with an equal sign so that we can tell that assignment is happening. Otherwise, we're doing get stuff. If it ends with an equal sign, we want to set the method name to a value. We will assign value to the first argument. So set will be a private method. We don't want to expose this to be used directly. So define set, it accepts a setting and a value. And what we want set to do is actually interact with our database, but we're going to create another class to actually help do this, an active record class. So let's create class record, and it will inherit from active record base. We'll set the table name equal to our simply settings. So we'll use this record class to interact with the database. So we'll create a new record for this setting and set its value. Okay, so now I'm going to run the tests, and we get undefined method ends with. So the reason we're getting undefined method ends with is because method name is a symbol and ends with is a method inside of the string library. So what we want to do is convert method name to a string, and we'll rerun. Okay, so now we're failing, but not for an error. We expected to get world and we got nil, which is correct because we haven't yet implemented get. So let's do that now. So get will accept method name, be another private method. And what get will do is look up the setting using record, and if it exists, it will return the value. So the reason our test is still failing is that our method name is being saved in the database with this equal sign. What we want to do here is remove it with chomp. Now if we run our tests, it should pass. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next test. So it returns nil for unknown getters. What we're saying here is that we expect settings.hello, if it's not defined, to equal to be nil. So this should just work for free based on our current implementation, and it does. Let's move on to the next test. It reassigns a value. So let's change this to an it and say settings dot hello equals world. Now if we reassign hello to hello, we expect that settings.hello to equal hello. Okay, so reassignment is broken. So the reason reassignment is broken is that our set is not considering the update case, the case when a setting is already in the database and we need to retrieve it and update its value. So let's do that. In order to do that, let's create a helper method called find. It will also be private, and it will look up a setting for us, and we'll extract the implementation from get. Place that with our find. Okay, so we want to first look up to see if the setting exists. If we get back a record, then we want to update our record. Update its value to the new value passed in and save it. Otherwise, we want to create a new record. Okay, let's run our tests and see if that satisfied things, and it looks like we're all good. Okay, so let's move on to deleting settings. So this will be a public method because we want to allow the users of our gem to interact with this method. Delete will accept a setting, and we will look up our record with our find and destroy it if we get something back. Oh, I forgot to write our test here, so let's comment this out and write this test over here. It deletes an explicit method name, so if we define hello to equal world, and then we say settings.delete hello, we expect settings. Oh, we don't have a method yet to check if a setting exists, so let's implement one. So we expect this setting not to exist. So let's say settings.exists hello to be false. We'll write our exists method. We'll say find setting present. Okay, so let's run our test. Should fail. Okay, so the problem that we ran into here is I don't have a question mark. Let's run our tests again. Should fail. Now we expected false and we got true because our delete method isn't implemented yet. Okay, so let's comment this out. Run our tests, and they pass. Fantastic. This next test, it deletes a setting when assigned to nil. So if we define a setting, hello, set it equal to world. And then if we reassign that setting to nil, we want the setting removed from the settings table. So we expect that settings.exists hello to be false. And this should fail because our set method doesn't yet handle that case. So what we want to do here is say if our value is nil, then we want to delete our setting. Else if and should be true. Should get all passing now. Okay, so that's it for today. Next time we'll implement fetching settings so that the settings gem behaves similar to a hash. You'll be able to use fetch and pass a block to set a default if the setting doesn't exist. We'll provide a way to list all of the settings in an array, and also set and retrieve objects like hashes, arrays, and booleans, so that when you set one in the database, you get back a hash, array, or boolean.